Okay. How is my sound?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Wendy. Could we hear your audio, please?
Yes, good morning. Hi, everyone.
That's great. Thank you
Good.
very much.
Thank you.
Katarina, could we hear yours as well?
Hi, good morning.
Thank you. We can hear you and see you. Good morning, Matthew. Could we hear your audio, please?
Sure. Hi, can you hear me?
That's great. Thank you very much. Good morning, Adam. Could we see your video and hear your audio, please? Adam, we can see you, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now I can barely hear you though. Bear with me. I'm gonna go find another headset.
We're going to get this party started shortly. We have some technical issues on our side. So before I get to that spiel in this script, it's like, please be patient. Technical issues.
Is anyone else seeing an automatic WebEx update countdown in the corner?
I think that one's just you, Adam.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Rady, and I am the chair of the Toronto Preservation Board. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I will now call meeting 34 of the Toronto Preservation Board to order. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. This is a hybrid meeting with some members, staff, and public attending in person and others connecting by video conference over the WebEx platform or calling in. This meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Because we are meeting in person and remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name, and I will call speakers in the order they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Toronto Preservation Board at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I would like to request that staff and invited participants, as well as all observers joining remotely, keep their video turned off unless they need to speak or answer questions. This will make it easier for me as chair to see my fellow members as we debate and vote on the agenda items. I also ask that all members keep their microphones muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item. To ensure that our meeting runs as it ought to, efficiently, with board members having equal opportunity to ask questions or speak to an item, I'm going to start following a little bit more rigorously the simplified rules, and I will run the timer for 5 minutes. Members will have up to 5 minutes each to ask questions of staff and speak on an item. And as a reminder, motions need to be moved at the beginning of a member's speaking time. That's when we move into discussion period. That's your speaking time. You have to move it at the beginning of that speaking time. And please submit and approve any motions by email. Staff are available at hertpb@toronto.ca to help with motions. Bear with me on this one, as there'll probably be a few bumps on my end. If members wish to speak on an item, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand, or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. If there is a recorded vote, you will be asked to state if you are in favor or opposed. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council. So although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Preservation Board would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of your interest. Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on June 30th, 2025? Peter. All those in favor, please? And the motion carries. So now we'll proceed to our agenda review. Our first item is PB 34.1, 207, 209, 211, 213, 215, 217, and 219 Jarvis Street, Notice of Intention to Designate Properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We have a presentation from planning staff available if we would like to hear it. Would anybody care to hold this item? Adam, thank you. Our next item is PB 34.2, 336, 340, and 342 to 344 Jarvis Street, Notice of Intention to Designate Properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We have a presentation from planning staff available if we would like to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Adam, thank you very much. Our next item is PB 34.3, 506, 510, and 512 Jarvis Street, Notice of Intention to Designate Properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We have a presentation from staff available. Would anybody like to hold this item? Adam and Jeff, thank you. PB 34.4, 81 Isabella Street, Notice of Intention to Designate a Property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Again, a presentation from planning staff is available. Would anybody care to hold this item? Adam, thank you very much. PB 34.5, 2726 and 2734 Danforth Avenue, Demolition of Designated Heritage Properties, approval with conditions. There are public speakers registered on this item, so I will hold it. And our final item is PB 34.6, 1117 Queen Street West, alterations to a designated property and demolition of heritage attributes of a building on a designated property under sections 33 and 34.1.1 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Request for directions. We have a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available. This report also contains a confidential attachment. Would anybody like to hold that item? Adam, thank you very much. Moving back to PB 34.1. Welcome, Emma and Tamara.
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Emma. I'm a heritage planner with the Policy and Research team, and I'll just wait for Hans to pull up the presentation before beginning. It's 34.1. Great, thanks, Hans. So today I'm presenting for item number PB 34.1, 207, 209, 211, 213, 215, 217, and 219 Jarvis Street. Notice of intention to designate properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide. The subject properties are located on the east side of Jarvis Street, near the northeast corner of Jarvis and Shooter Streets in the Moss Park neighborhood. The properties contain two contiguous multi-unit residential buildings. Pictured at top right, 215 to 19 Jarvis Street contains a three-story terrace comprised of three identical dwellings, designed in the Italianate style and constructed in 1863. Pictured below at right, the properties at 207 to 13 Jarvis Street contain a residential block comprised of four townhouses constructed in 1879 and designed in the Second Empire style. All 7 subject properties were listed on the City of Toronto's Heritage Register on November 21st, 1977. Next slide. So a bit of historical background. Present-day Jarvis Street bisects the former Park Lot 6, which was one of the original 32 park lots that were surveyed under Lieutenant Governor John Graves Simcoe in 1793. Park Lot 6 was granted to William Jarvis in 1796, and subsequently inherited by his son, Samuel Peters Jarvis, in 1817. The approximate location of the lands that the Jarvises owned is shown on the map at left, as indicated by the red arrows, which shows Park Lot 6, as well as some town lots that the family owned. Around 1846, Samuel Jarvis hired John George Howard to draft a plan of subdivision for Park Lot 6. Howard was a native of England who immigrated to Canada in 1832, and he became an influential figure in the burgeoning city as its official surveyor and civil engineer. He was not only responsible for establishing lot and road patterns within Toronto, but also for the design of numerous buildings of importance, including the Canada Company Office, Colborne Lodge, the Bank of British North America, and Provincial Lunatic Asylum. Within Park Lot 6 specifically, Howard's subdivision plan looked to provide lots catering to a range of residents. He designed a plan that called for narrow lots at the southern portions of Jarvis Street subdivision that were intended to appeal to developers building housing for the working class, in contrast to the larger lots reserved for larger residences further to the north. The 1851 Sanford Fleming map pictured at right shows the subdivision along Jarvis Street. Next slide, please. The paving of Jarvis Street in the 1870s made way for the extension and continuation of the grand public right-of-way planned by John Howard that was to define Jarvis as the premier residential district in Toronto. Jarvis Street was especially recognized for its outstanding public realm, namely the breadth of the street with its sidewalks, ornamental fences, and great shade trees rising from grassy landscaping. These features garnered comparisons with the Champs-Élysées in Paris. However, this characterization did not extend the length of the street. Already by the 1880s, the southern portions of Jarvis below Dundas contained boarding houses and townhouses that were subdivided for lodgers, indicating a stratification along the street that would only grow in the coming decades. Next slide. The properties at 215 to 19 Jarvis Street were constructed around 1863, appearing in the assessment records of that year as 3 vacant dwellings owned by the builder Thomas Snar. The subject properties appear in the 1864 directories and were first inhabited by Aaron Walker and John Walker, both worked in the dry goods business, as well as William Henderson, a grocer. The 1891 census paints a picture of the demographics and occupancy of these properties that is reflective of the broader neighborhood's evolving context. 217 was home to 7 lodgers, all being men in their late teens through 30s, and 1 married couple, who were also employed in dry goods, wholesale, and manufacturing industries. Even in cases where a family occupied the house, such as the Finnegan family at 219, rooms were let to young men seeking accommodation within proximity of the employment available within the urban core. The first half of the 20th century marked a period of gradual decline in the building stock within the lower Jarvis neighborhood, particularly south of Gerrard, with most being used as rooming houses or left vacant and subject to vandalism and unauthorized occupation. In contrast to that trend, in 1977, the first set of comprehensive plans were filed by Zeidler Partnership Architects with the City of Toronto to redevelop 207 through 219 Jarvis Street by converting the structures into apartment houses and office space. You can see an example of the Zeidler plans pictured at top right and an image of the subject property's post-redevelopment at top left in 1979. The adaptation of the properties showed a sensitivity to their historic built form and materials, and the development coincided with their listing on the city's heritage register. Next slide. The properties have design and physical value as representative examples of the Italianate architecture style as applied to the terrace building typology. The style was popular in Toronto through the 1850s and into the 1860s, and was applied to institutional and government buildings, commercial buildings, and housing for those of moderate incomes, as is the case at 215 to 19 Jarvis. Features representative of this style include the flat roofs behind the cornices, the use of classically derived and highly detailed ornamentation, the raised parlor floors, and the segmental arched window openings. The properties also display artistic merit through the design of the primary facade, being the west facade, with the highly detailed and vibrantly colored two-story bay windows, the contrasting use of red brick with buff stone, and brick lintels and dentils. Within the city of Toronto, the properties are a rare example of the terrace building type as designed for the middle class. Next slide, please. Switching now to the properties at 207 to 213 Jarvis, which contain a residential block comprised of 4 townhouses, originally constructed in 1879 as single-family homes and converted into apartments in the early 20th century. The census records from 1881 provide insight into the residents of the newly constructed dwellings, all of which were occupied by families with children and occupations that included a doctor, a minister, a naval commander, and retirees. The 1891 census contrasts that from a decade earlier. While few families remained, the residents were primarily lodgers and employed in a variety of professions, including merchants, bookkeepers, upholsterers, domestics, and plumbers. At the start of the 20th century, the context and character of the area was firmly entrenched as a neighborhood primarily comprised of boarding houses interspersed with private residences. Next slide. Stylistically, the block is representative of the Second Empire style as applied to a middle-class townhouse building type. Second Empire was popular in Toronto through the 1860s and into the 1870s. Features representative of the style include the mansard roof, the generally symmetrical composition of the grouping, and the use of classically derived ornamentation, including the dentil courses set below the mansard roof, round arch openings, the entrances with alternating surrounds of side lights and columns, transom windows and stone hood molds with keystones, and pedimented dormer windows. These properties were also part of the redevelopment undertaken by Zeidler in 1977. Next slide, please. Situated on the east side of Jarvis Street, north of Shooter Street, together the subject properties form a historic street wall where they represent the southernmost remaining properties that were part of John Howard's initial subdivision of Park Lot 6. They are linked to Howard's plan of subdivision, which called for the narrow lots towards the southern end, catering to this type of finer grain, higher density housing. Today, the streetscape and neighborhood surrounding the subject properties reflects an evolved urban context comprised of buildings constructed between the latter half of the 19th century up to the present day. However, the subject properties are the only buildings contemporaneous to the mid-19th century remaining within the immediate streetscape context. Collectively, these remaining residential buildings contribute to an understanding of the layered history of this storied street, reflecting both the period of prosperity during which they were constructed, as well as the subsequent decades where new uses took up home in old buildings. Standing alongside mid-century apartment towers, institutional buildings, and contemporary condominiums, they form an important part of Jarvis Street's historic and evolving context. Therefore, for the reasons summarized in this presentation, staff have determined that the 7 properties are worthy of designation under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to open up to questions of staff, and everybody will have an equal opportunity, but everybody will have 5 minutes. And then if we needed to do another round, then all of us need to agree that we'll do a second round of questions, just to to ensure that everybody's voice is heard today. So, do we have questions of staff? Adam, I'm going to start the timers, which you'll see on the screen, and ask away.
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair. Is it that you want all questions asked in one go, or one question at a time still?
That's the preference. We'll do all the questions, so all of your questions within your 5 minutes, and they'll get responded to. Okay?
Okay.
Awesome. Here we go. I assume you have a question, Adam?
I do, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if staff could speak a little bit more to the role of the Snar family as builders in the Confederation era of Toronto. It's my understanding they were quite significant, especially in the downtown east. And that is the only question I have right now, but I do have comments for the next part.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Adam. Do you have a specific question about the Snar family that you're looking for about their relevance? Because as you mentioned, they did have a lot of
If there's any further information as to the role or projects they were involved in, we know this is a rare surviving example of a mid-19th century Italian townhouse, but the Snars apparently had quite a role in the expansion of Toronto during the Confederation era. And I'm just curious if any of that information is available.
Not for this report particularly. He was the builder for these properties, and that's what we're focusing on today. Didn't do an extensive research into Thomas Snar for other properties because they're not within this report.
I thought that perhaps, given the prominence of Jarvis Street in this era, the selection of Thomas Snar as a builder for these lots may have had some connection to his broader role in the city at that time, but not to worry. Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion amongst ourselves. Anybody like to open the floor with discussion points? Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a fun fact, these were some of the very first houses in Toronto to have modern indoor running water and on-demand hot water. So for anyone who likes their hot showers or hot baths in the morning or evening, these houses were ground zero for that in the city of Toronto. And then also, it's really wonderful to see some of Jarvis Street's mid-19th century architecture preserved, because I know a few years ago there was some disappointment when we lost the Englewood Arms, or are in the process of losing the Englewood Arms, another mid-19th century building on that section of Jarvis Street. So I commend staff for the wonderful report and the push to save some of Jarvis Street's built heritage.
Thank you very much. Any other points of discussion amongst ourselves? Seeing none, I have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody like to move the recommendations in the report? I will happily. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on now to PB 34.2.
That's also me. I'm afraid you all might be a bit sick of me this morning. I'll try not to lull you to sleep. So I'm presenting again for 34.2, which includes 336, 340, and 342 to 344 Jarvis Street. Notice of intention to designate properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please, Hans. So these four subject properties are located on the west side of Jarvis Street, mid-block between Carleton Street to the south and Sermon Lane to the north in the Church Wellesley neighborhood. The properties are part of a collection of 5 abutting Victorian-era house-form buildings from 336 to the south and 344 to the north. Early residents of this block included merchants, teacher, various laborers, along with domestic staff. The residences would have been fashionable middle and upper-class houses within the Upper Jarvis community. All of the properties were constructed between 1863 and 75, and they were included on the inaugural list of entries on the City of Toronto's Inventory of Heritage Properties on June 20th, 1973. Next slide, please. Similar to the historical background discussed in my presentation for 34.1, the properties are located within the former Park Lot 6 that was owned by the Jarvis family and subsequently subdivided by the city's official surveyor, John George Howard. And again, the paving on Jarvis Street in the 1870s made way for the extension and continuation of the grand public right-of-way planned by Howard that was to define Jarvis as the premier residential district in Toronto. Next slide. Constructed in 1863, 336 Jarvis Street contains a 2.5-story structure with a raised parlor floor that was designed in the Georgian architecture style with subsequent alterations in the Second Empire style in 1886. The Second Empire style was popular in Toronto through the 1860s and into the 70s, and was applied to institutional and government buildings, detached villas, and row houses for those of moderate income, whereas the Georgian style was more common for row houses constructed through the 1850s and 60s. Features representative of the Second Empire style include the mansard roof and the pedimented dormer windows. Features indicative of the building's original Georgian style include the general symmetry of the main east facade, the flat-headed window openings, and the splayed stone lintels. 336 Jarvis Street has historical and associative value due to its direct association with the artist and educator Frederick Bell Smith, who lived at the property from 1890 until his death in 1923. Bell Smith's career and reputation in Toronto was already established by the time he and his family moved into the house. However, it would be during his tenure here that he developed an international reputation owing to his production of a series of paintings that depicted the events surrounding the death of Prime Minister Sir John Sparrow David Thompson at Windsor Castle. While there, Bell Smith received a rare invitation to paint Queen Victoria as part of the series, and this was a significant event that contributed to his prestige and reputation. Bell Smith subsequently co-founded the Arts and Letters Club of Toronto in 1908 and served as the president of the Ontario Society of Artists from 1905 to 1908. The lower level of 336 Jarvis Street served as his personal studio, where he hosted artists and students, and later served as a gathering space for friends and admirers following his death in 1923. His personal artwork remained on display at the subject property following his death because the property stayed in the Bell Smith family's ownership. Next slide, please. Constructed around 1863, the property at 340 Jarvis Street contains one side of a present-day semi-detached dwelling paired with 338 Jarvis Street, which was designated Part 4 in 2007. 340 Jarvis Street contains a 2.5-story structure with a raised parlor floor that was designed in the Georgian style with subsequent alterations in the Second Empire style. The property was constructed for single-family occupancy, however, was subsequently modified for a rooming house and later apartments. The building is primarily clad in red brick, featuring buff brick accents, wood details, and a mixture of round arch and flat-headed window openings. A 2-story rounded bay extends from the raised lower level up to the cornice. The property at 340 Jarvis Street displays a high degree of artistic merit through the fine detailing and features on the primary facade, including the mansard roof with pedimented jerkin-head dormer windows and patterned slate shingles, raised outlook that is shared with 338 Jarvis Street, and second-story sunroom supported by slender wooden columns with brackets and Corinthian-style capitals. The property at 340 Jarvis Street has historical and associative value due to its direct association with the John Howard Society, which operated within the building from around 1956 until the early 1960s. The John Howard Society was established in Toronto in 1929 as the Citizens Service Association by Chief of Police Dennis Draper in an effort to provide housing and employment services to previously incarcerated men. The association was renamed to John Howard Society and went on to establish organizations across Canada. With the prevalence of boarding houses and social service providers along and surrounding Jarvis Street, 340 Jarvis Street was an opportune location for the society to connect with clients and those seeking assistance following incarceration. So the location of 340 Jarvis Street really situated the John Howard Society within proximity of the communities that it serviced. It was also in immediate proximity to the Elizabeth Fry Society, which I'll talk about later, and they provided services for former female inmates and operating out of 344 Jarvis Street from about 1953 to 56. Next slide, please. Okay, so the properties at 342 and 44 Jarvis Street contain a mirrored pair of semi-detached house form buildings that first appear in the assessment records in 1875, listed as 2 3-story brick houses. The properties are representative of the Italianate architecture style, which was popular in Toronto through the 1860s and into the 1870s, and was applied primarily to commercial and industrial properties, and in some instances, urban residential house form structures. Italianate is a classically based style that typically includes architectural motifs like round arch window openings, the use of ornamental brackets, corbels and dentils, a raised first story or parlor floor with access to a lower story, flat, low-pitched and side gable roofs, the use of polychrome brick for decorative effect, and an emphasis on verticality in the design and composition. 342 and 344 Jarvis Street illustrate the application of the Italianate style to an urban semi-detached building type and retain key features to this style and period of construction. The property at 342 Jarvis Street on the left-hand side, which has the white painted brick, has historical and associative value due to its direct association with Clementines and the Lesbian Organization of Toronto in the mid-1970s to 1980. In 1972, a 2-year lease was signed for the property by representatives of Clementines, an initiative that was founded as a women's cultural center specifically oriented towards Toronto's growing feminist and lesbian communities, who had few formalized physical gathering spaces in the city at the time. Clementine's was a truly crowdsourced initiative, and the funds were paid for by supporters through memberships that were sold to maintain the group's exclusivity to women. Through donations in cash, labor, and materials were all accepted and solicited through fundraisers and mailouts. While brief, Clementine's history at 342 Jarvis Street was significant because it served as an important gathering space that became a catalyst for ongoing organizing within Toronto's lesbian community. For instance, the Lesbian Organization of Toronto, or LOOT, which was Toronto's first openly lesbian feminist group that moved into 342 Jarvis Street in 1976. Primarily a volunteer-run organization, LOOT used the property as a safe space for women and lesbians in Toronto to confer, to organize, and socialize. The building also provided rental housing and an event space. LOOT's tenure and use of the property during the 1970s and their ability to crowdfund reflects the growing need and ability for these and similar groups to organize and secure space within the city at a time when significant prejudice existed against LGBTQ+ communities. The property at 342 Jarvis Street yields information that contributes to an understanding of Toronto's queer, feminist, and lesbian community in the second half of the 20th century. Whew. All right, 344 Jarvis Street on your right-hand side, which is not painted, has historic and associative value due to its direct association with the Elizabeth Fry Society, an organization established to provide support for women who were previously incarcerated and seeking to reintegrate with society. The Elizabeth Fry Society was founded in 1952 and established its headquarters at 344 Jarvis Street the following year, in 1953. It's likely that the Elizabeth Fry Society sought space at 344 Jarvis Street in part due to the proximity of the property to rooming houses and institutions, very similar to the John Howard Society at 340 Jarvis Street. After leaving 344 Jarvis, the Elizabeth Fry Society continued to operate within the adjacent community, later constructing their purpose-built offices on Wesley Street east of Sherbourne Street. Next slide. The subject properties are important in maintaining and supporting the character of the Upper Jarvis neighborhood, comprised of a concentration of properties built during the mid to late Victorian period, including several designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. The subject properties reflect the evolution of Upper Jarvis from a subdivision of private homes located on a landscaped avenue to a high-density residential and institutional arterial corridor within downtown Toronto that now contains a collection of mid to late 19th century institutional buildings and 20th century multi-unit housing. Together, the subject properties form a historic streetscape with a generally consistent setback and rhythm of raised parlor floors, common scale, form, and massing, and they each contribute to the block frontage's historic context. In particular, 336 Jarvis Street contains one of the earliest extant structures within the Upper Jarvis neighborhood. Therefore, for the reasons summarized in this presentation, staff have determined that the four properties are worthy of designation under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have just somebody on screen that needs to get removed. Oh, never mind. There we go. I figured that one out. All right, questions of staff. Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to be succinct with my questions here. And thank you to staff for that wonderful presentation. It's my understanding these houses are smaller in scale than some of the others to the north and south. Early accounts described the Jarvis and Carleton intersection as an impassable swamp, and that remained on the surface after the construction of some of these houses in the 1860s, with one account in Austin Sutton Thompson's Jarvis Street, A Story of Tragedy, describing somebody walking along in the evening, and some of these houses had little drawbridges. Somebody took the bridge up and they fell into the brink. I'm just wondering if the smaller scale of these houses at all had to do with the lost creek or the buried creek, and the role of the impassable swamp in the development of the Jarvis and Carleton Street intersection. I realize that may be a rather niche question, and I'm happy to defer if need be to staff. Also, I had a phone call with Emma about a month ago regarding the associated histories of these properties, And I'd like to thank Emma for inclusion of Frederick Bell Smith in the reports, because obviously they're a very important Canadian painter. But I note the omission of Frederick Torrington, the founder of some of Toronto's first musical orchestras, who also resided in the same house at an earlier point in time, and Charles Moss, a Chief Justice of Ontario, who similarly resided in that same house. Similarly, Mrs. Susan Lampman had an arts, music, and language school in the house with the second floor sunroom that has been consolidated together in the 1880s. And I'm just wondering if there's perhaps some associated history with this specific block around the arts and cultural uses. Thank you.
Okay, several points in that question, so I'm going to try and address them individually, and I may have to ask you to repeat some of them. So as for the...
Not to worry, it's a different format than before, and I realize sometimes it's easier to do individual questions followed by responses rather than all of them in one go, but I'm trying to respect the Madam Chair's request.
Thank you, Adam. Just let's
Yep.
let Emma have her moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Before Emma responds directly just to the chair itself, it's really challenging for us to come to committee and not have our research documents here with us at the same time as us presenting. And if at all possible, that members, when they are looking at research, if they could send that to us in advance, we would be much better prepared to answer these questions. So I'm actually going to decline to comment about the first one, because we're communicating with our consultant. We believe that he has not done that more detailed research, but I just don't want to make a statement at this time.
No, not to worry, and I completely understand that.
Adam,
I'm
please
also
let Tamara finish answering your question.
And with regards to the general questions about individuals, et cetera, thank you, Adam, for sharing that in advance to us as part of our consultation and engagement with the Toronto East York panel and you specifically. We reviewed all of those associations, and they do not meet the provincial criteria, in part because their body of work, or to which they're prominent and known for, did not reflect within the building itself, nor did they themselves commission those buildings. So it doesn't meet the criteria the provincial criteria. Thank you.
Any further questions, Adam?
Not at the moment, but I look forward to continuing discussion around the buried and lost creek, especially with the adoption of formal cultural daylighting policies by the City of Toronto for those waterways.
Thank you. Other questions of staff? Seeing none, moving into discussion amongst ourselves. Jeff?
I do, excuse me, I do note that there is a letter of opposition from the owner of 342, Albert Perez, but he's not here today to speak to it. He just simply says that it lacks heritage value and it was in terrible condition when he bought it, and he's done a lot of work to improve it. He feels that her designation would be a bad thing. It would impose restrictions on him and a financial burden, compliance, and so on. I guess my question is, clearly it merits designation despite what the owner says, but and the interesting stories about 342 and the connections with the women community. But I'm wondering, do you go back to, assuming it's passed, do you go back to the owners and note that, for example, they would become eligible, once it's designated, become eligible for assistance for heritage awards, for maintenance awards?
Jeff, this is a question for staff, not discussion
Oh,
point?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, it's a question for staff. We're here.
Through the chair, thank you very much for the question, Jeff. One of the things that's really important to us as we move forward with the Bill 23 work is our interaction with the owners. And so we have been in touch and will continue to communicate with the owners. And definitely one of the things that we make sure they understand is the possibility that they could be eligible for support for a variety of works. So, yes.
Are there other questions of staff? Seeing none, moving into, sorry, Adam, is that question?
Yes, my apologies, Madam Chair. Just to, it's a, I'll leave it for the comment section.
Is a comment? Okay. We're into comments now. Any discussion points? Adam? Do you want to start?
Yes, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank again staff for the wonderful report, and especially the inclusion of the 2S LGBTQ and feminist history within this report. So often we see 2S LGBTQ history omitted, and this building specifically, or this row building specifically, has had such an important role, especially with the lesbian organization in Toronto for early queer activism. I also like to note it's an interesting anomaly on this block where one of these houses was designated a number of years ago, but the rest of the row remained listed. So it's really wonderful to see the rest of these now being designated after just one pair of the semi-detached, or one half of one pair of the semi-detaches was originally designated. So thank you.
Other points of discussion? I think probably my only discussion point would be, given the communication that we get, that we have yet again a situation where, unfortunately, there's sometimes a lack of understanding that heritage isn't an impediment to change, but it helps to manage change going forward in order to continue to conserve those attributes that help to define Toronto's history, but allow it to go forward. And so I think to continue a dialogue, and I will continue to beat that, to say it and ask these questions in these meetings when they're in such a public forum, to say that it's not the end of the world to be designated. In fact, it's not a bad thing, because then change can be managed going forward. So there's my 45 seconds. Is there any other discussion points? Seeing none, we have yet another good staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody like to move the recommendations in that report? Mitchell, all those in favor? Fantastic. Motion carries. Moving on now to PB 34.3. Hi, Emma. Welcome back.
It's been a while. All right. Just wait for Hans to get the presentation up. Wonderful, thank you. So my last presentation for today is for item number 34.3, which includes 506, 510, and 512 Jarvis Street, notice of intention to designate properties under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. The three subject properties at 506, 510, 512 are located on the west side of Jarvis Street, in between Gloucester Street to the north and Cawthorne Square to the south in the Church Wesley neighborhood. The properties contain three abutting detached house form buildings that were all constructed between 1888 and 1890 and are each representative examples of the annex architectural style. All three properties were included on the inaugural list of entries on the City of Toronto's Inventory of Heritage Properties on June 20th, 1973. Next slide, please. I won't rehash the details of the historical background, but it's the same as for PB 34.1 and .2. The properties are located within the former Park Lot 6 that was owned by the Jarvis family and subsequently subdivided by John George Howard. It's the same, the paving made way for the extension and the continuation of the Grand Public right-of-way. The subject properties in this report are located at the northern end of Howard's plan that contained the larger lots reserved for the construction of grand residences. Next slide, please. Constructed circa 1888 and renovated with an addition in 1950, the property at 506 Jarvis Street contains a detached 2.5-story house form designed by the architecture firm Langley & Burke. Comprised of the architects Henry Langley and his nephew Edmund Burke, the studio is one of Toronto's most prolific and sought-after architecture practices for designing ecclesiastical, government, and private residential projects between 1883 and 1892. The property at 506 Jarvis Street also has historical and associative value due to its direct association with the United Church of Canada and its operation as a home for retired United Church missionaries. The subject property was purchased by the United Church in 1944 and was first used as a hostel for Canadian Japanese men until about 1950, when an application was submitted on behalf of the Women's Missionary Society to construct an addition to the property for the purposes of housing the retired ministers with the United Church. The Women's Missionary Society provided domestic and overseas support related to the church's activities, including nursing, education, and housing. The subject property remained within the United Church's ownership until 1957, at which time it was sold and converted to a lodging house. Next slide, please. The property of 506 Jarvis Street has design and physical value as a representative example of the annex architecture style applied to a detached house form structure that also displays a high degree of artistic merit. The annex style was popular in Toronto from the 1880s up to 1900. The origins of the style are often attributed to the architect E.J. Lennox. However, it was employed by numerous practitioners and was primarily, if not exclusively, applied to residential house form structures. And the style itself combines elements of the Romanesque and Queen Anne architecture styles. Features representative of the annex style include the use of brick, sandstone, and terracotta cladding, fine details depicting vegetal and organic motifs, and low and grouped round arch window openings. 506 Jarvis is primarily clad in that red brick with the terracotta features atop a stone foundation and a side entrance accessed by a covered porch. The building is set back from the sidewalk with a front yard, currently landscaped with planter beds, lawn, and a parking pad. A wrought iron fence encloses the property. 506 Jarvis is emblematic of the annex style in its arrangement and ornamentation, spanning from the rusticated stone foundation, that red brick color tone, to the denticulated wood window casings on the third story. Next slide, please. 510 Jarvis Street was constructed around 1888 for Thomas B. Taylor. The property contains a detached 2.5-story house form structure with a rear 3-story addition. The property was a single-family residence until 1919, when it was converted into apartment house containing 10 separate apartments, with a later 5 apartments added through interior renovations prior to 1981. Next slide, please. The property at 510 Jarvis Street has design and physical value as a representative example of the annex style applied to a detached house form structure that also displays a high degree of artistic merit. It is also primarily clad in that red brick with stone and terracotta details. The front facade features an asymmetrical design comprised of a prominent window bay set beneath a gabled roof, and the primary entrance to the side and set within a wood portico that serves as a 2nd-story balcony. A 2-story porch on the south elevation provides access to a secondary entrance. The tinted terracotta spandrel panels adorn the front facade alongside carved brick and decorative lintels. The secondary south facade extends the length of the original structure and the 1919 addition, which is set behind a protruding gable bay that marks the end of the original house form building. 510 Jarvis is also emblematic of the annex style, including its rectangular window openings on the lower stories with stone sills and lintels, transitioning to more delicate architecture elements on the upper floors, such as the plate glass transoms, ornamental brick and terracotta panels in the spandrels, and wood brackets, with a highly articulated roofline. Next slide, please. Constructed around 1890, the property of 512 Jarvis Street contains a 2.5-story detached house form building. The Rundle family resided next door at 514 Jarvis Street through the first decade of the 20th century. They owned this property and they either sold or leased it out, first to Edward Gallows, a broker, and then to Charles Band, a grain merchant. By the 1920s, most of the larger homes in the Upper Jarvis neighborhood had been purchased by institutions or converted to boarding or apartment houses. An application was filed with the City of Toronto in 1925 to permit the erection of 3 garages at the rear of 512 Jarvis and to convert the existing single-family dwelling into 3 apartments. Building permit records indicate that the front porch and second-floor balcony were added in 1927, and the pitch of the roof was altered to accommodate additional living space on the 3rd floor. Since 2015, the property has operated as the Mary Sheffield House, providing housing units specifically for women 55 years of age or older, leaving the shelter system. The property at 512 Jarvis Street has design and physical value as a representative example of the annex architectural style and also displays a high degree of artistic merit. Features indicative of the style include the flat-headed window openings on the lower stories with stone sills and lintels, again transitioning to the more delicate architectural elements on the upper floors, including the round arched window openings, eaves with exposed brackets, and the gabled dormer protruding from the hipped roof with dentils. Next slide, please. The surrounding context of the subject properties reflects the area's initial development as that upscale residential district of single-family detached homes through the late 19th and into the early 20th century. Adjacent multifamily apartment buildings constructed in the mid-20th century reflect the increased development that occurred following the construction of the Huntley Street extension. Contextually, the subject properties form part of a collection of 19th century housing occupying the full block frontage of Jarvis Street between Cawthorne Square and Gloucester Street. Each property contains a detached house form structure designed in the annex style with a generally consistent setback, scale, form, and massing. That block frontage between Cawthorne and Gloucester is a rare example of a preserved late 19th century streetscape on Jarvis, reflecting both the adaptability of these structures for accommodating new uses, as well as the efforts of property owners to retain and conserve these historic buildings. Together, each property contributes to maintaining and supporting the historical residential character of the Upper Jarvis neighborhood, where they reflect the evolution of Upper Jarvis from a subdivision of private homes located on a landscaped avenue into the high-density residential and institutional corridor within downtown Toronto. Therefore, for the reasons summarized in this presentation, staff have determined that the properties at 506, 510, and 512 Jarvis Street are worthy of designation under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Moving into questions of staff. Peter.
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation and staff report. I just had a question about the physical condition of 512, given that there was a letter of objection which asserted that there is not much original physical building fabric remaining. I think it said that there's only a few bricks and stained glass windows. So do you know much about the physical condition and whether or not that statement is accurate?
Thanks. I'm going to let Tamara take this one.
Through the chair, thank you very much for the question. As we know that when we are doing heritage evaluation, that for us, it's about the integrity of the building, and our consultant who provided the research for us and the evaluation, as well as our staff review of that, support its conclusions that there is enough integrity for this property that is representative of both the design and the style. So that's really for us is the mark for us to do. And yes, it does have integrity.
Do you want to answer too?
Just one more thing, and this is probably important to clarify just because of the way the owner phrased the letter about being an objection. Because there is a formal objection process, we will certainly let the owner know that this is not the way to do that, that the way to do that is to wait for it to get to council. I think the owner's intention is that it not get there, but if it gets there, there will be an opportunity for objections to be raised that can cover a whole range of issues that we would look into very carefully. So if that allays any concerns, that we would move forward with anything in terms of a designation by law that perhaps did not reflect an accurate picture, but that is our moment in time to do that.
Other questions of staff? Adam. You're muted, Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does this site have archaeological potential, given its former history as the Toronto lacrosse grounds that was an important site for Indigenous and non-Indigenous sports teams to play?
Through the chair, thank you, Adam. The archaeological management plan is worked on through the planning and development process. So where there is archaeological potential, as we have discussed before in other projects, there is an opportunity to do archaeology. So assessments are done, determinations are made, and certainly in terms of the older properties, we would look for that as a possibility, but also taking into account modern disturbance. So that's not before us here, but that is happening in the development process.
Thank you.
Other questions, Adam?
Not at the moment, no, thank you.
Okay. Other questions of
Actually,
staff? Yep.
Madam Chair, my apologies, I misspoke there. The stained glass windows on some of these properties are particularly important as they link to the electrification of Jarvis Street. Henry Knight, a stained glass conservator, has spoken about them on several occasions. Can we confirm that those stained glass windows are heritage attributes within the destination?
Just confirming.
Both stained and leaded glass?
Just confirming, you mean for 506, 510, and 512, all three?
That's correct, yes, yeah.
Okay.
And by the term stained, I also mean leaded, so stained and leaded glass. I know there's a technical distinction between the two, but they're both significant in this context.
We've reviewed the statement of significance for each of those properties. We do need to confer with our consultant specifically on that matters, but it's a good question for us to follow up. Thank you.
Yeah. And if I may respond just with a brief comment, Madam Chair.
Do you want to wait till discussion period for a comment? This is
Oh,
questions.
I'll phrase it as a question, actually.
Go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Were staff or the consultants able to gain access to the interior of any of these buildings, specifically, I think 506 and 510? It's my understanding they have significant, in some cases, interior elements, including interior stained glass that might warrant interest towards destination. Of course, wanting to respect the privacy of residents at the same time.
Thank you for your question. Through the chair, no, the consultant did not review the interior of these properties.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, moving into discussion amongst ourselves. Any points of discussion? Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to make sure any leaded or stained glass is protected in this context. Is there an opportunity for clarification prior to us voting on this matter? Or do staff need time to go back and speak with the consultant?
Given that we're in discussion period, I imagine that there isn't. You've just asked the questions of staff.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to return and ask that question of staff for Adam, just so for your own edification?
Well, I'm thinking specifically of they mentioned that they need to go back to speak to, Madam Chair, through you, Madam Chair, staff mentioned they need to speak more with the consultant. Is it correct in assuming that there's not currently mention of these windows in the attributes?
I'm going to pass you over to Mary.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, through the chair, the attributes are listed in the report, so Emma will answer that one, and I'll answer the broader question about issues of, content that might arise out of the meeting and how we can deal with that.
Thanks, Mary. So the window openings and ornamentation of the buildings are mentioned as attributes, but if you're looking for or meaning explicit language saying the leaded stained glass, they are not currently listed as attributes. I need to go back and consult with a consultant.
Yeah, so this is again, we didn't want to get too much into the process of Bill 23, but what we're trying to do is to sort of stage the reports with the potential for time in between this meeting and the report coming to planning and housing, growth, planning and housing. And so this meeting, in essence, becomes sort of the final heritage consultation on the matter. So we will take what we hear back, and whether we hired a consultant or whether we have done, consultant-free research. We're always vetting research materials, whether we're, doing the initial research or not. But we can take that back and explore it. And should there be something that we think can be added, we would then potentially talking about that, making that change for the next version of this report that will go to council. The stained glass windows are complicated because we do need access, and that may or may not be possible. And we need records that may or may not be possible. And so we err on the side of, if we don't know, we don't want to move forward with something that could be erroneous. But we can take that to as far a place as we can.
Now that we're still in questions, any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a procedural question. In this context, would it be helpful to have a motion requesting further examination of these elements and not to confine staff in terms of listing or designation, but requesting specific examination? Oh, we've lost the audio feed.
No, not quite yet. Just trying to figure out where I'm directing your question to.
Okay.
I lost my audio because I'm thinking. I think.
Mary, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Sure, okay. I would say, as this report is not proceeding immediately to planning and housing, that by the time the letter from the board asking for that motion to ask for that work, it would already have been done. So it would be confusing to the Planning and Housing Committee to receive a motion to which we will have looked at it. If you don't mind, I just was going to do a bit of a follow-up about the technical part. Stained glass is often perceived as being an interior feature because, in fact, it's a feature that you appreciate from within as opposed to it being seen as the exterior. I'm not saying that's the right answer, but I'm just saying that that's part of the discourse that happens on looking at that as the learned members of this committee and board would understand. But we take that back either way to look at it. Thank you.
Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I would like to err on the side of caution and bring forward a motion requesting examination of those stained glass. I humbly request if you hold this item, I will send it over to the clerks ASAP. But we know just both with 512 with the important electrification panel where there's a shift to clear glass. Then also I'm looking at 506 right now.
Okay.
And I can see this quite significant on the side elevations that may have escaped initial examination on the front. So I'll send that to clerks and I humbly request that you might hold this item until that
I will
comes back.
hold the item until then. Please send your
Thank you.
wording in. All right. Now that that's tabled, we're going to move on to PB 34.4. 81 Isabella. And Emma gets a break. Welcome, Claire.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Claire Forward, and today I will be presenting item number PB 34.4, 81 Isabella Street, notice of intention to designate a property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Next slide, please. The property at 81 Isabella Street is located on the south side of Isabella Street between Church Street and Jarvis Street in the Church-Wellesley neighborhood. The property at 81 Isabella Street contains a two-story apartment building with raised basement constructed in 1927, known as the Merlin Apartments. The property is listed on the City of Toronto's Heritage Register. Next slide, please. The property at 81 Isabella has design and physical value as a representative example of a 1927 apartment building constructed in the period revival style with Edwardian influences. Characteristic of the style, the building's principal north elevations are symmetrically arranged, containing two wings detailed with ornamented window and door openings. The principal north elevations of the wings have a dignified rusticated base, which follows with rug brick, a coin section located at the first and second stories, then topped by a cornice and brick parapet, which is currently overclad with flashing. Other defining classical elements include the twin main entrance doorway surrounds with their pilasters and entablatures, a limestone belt course that separates the ground floor from the upper levels, and limestone block coining defining the outer perimeter of the twin principal north elevations. Next slide, please. The property has historical value for recalling the socioeconomic and development history of the Church-Wellesley village, surviving as a part of a collection of remaining apartment residences in the area. The property serves as defining a role in the historic transition of the neighborhood in the first few decades of the 20th century, from an area of single-family residences to a zone containing a concentration of nearly 40 extant apartment houses between Bay, Bloor, Carleton, and Sherbourne Streets. Due to the area's proximity to downtown, it was one of the first areas of the city to be redeveloped into an area dominated by apartment buildings. By the mid-1900s, many early 20th century house-form buildings in the area had become rentals, boarding houses, and some were replaced by apartment buildings, attracting single people who would come to define the demographic makeup of the Church-Wellesley village. The property is also valued for its association with the architect Norman Alexander Armstrong, who designed the period revival style building with Edwardian influences. Armstrong started his architecture firm in 1919 and completed a variety of projects that included apartment buildings, commercial and retail operations, and single-family residences. The Merlin Apartments at 81 Isabella Street represents one of his first designs in the multi-residential walk-up apartment typology. Armstrong subsequently designed the Mayfair Apartments, the Haddon Hall Apartments, and the St. Edmunds Apartments in Toronto. Next slide, please. Contextually, the Church-Wellesley Village contains a significant number of early 20th century apartment houses, leading to a distinct and notable concentration of nearly 40 buildings in this typology between Bay, Bloor, Carleton, and Sherbourne Streets. The majority of these apartments, generally 6 stories or less in height, were developed in the 1920s and early 1930s. The property helps define, maintain, and support the overall character of the area. Next slide, please. Therefore, for the reasons summarized in this presentation, staff have determined that the property at 81 Isabella Street is worthy of designation under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. 81 Isabella Street meets 4 of the 9 criteria prescribed by Ontario Regulation 906. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving now into questions of staff. Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to phrase these succinctly and one at a time within the 5-minute period. The first 2 pertain to design elements, the second 2 pertain to associative elements. Regarding the design elements, could staff clarify whether the brick parapet is intact under the metal cladding and whether the metal cornice of the cladding is part of the features or not? And the second design-related query pertains to the decorative lead glass panels surrounding the front doors and above the front doors. Are those included within the designation attributes? The 2 associative elements are, I'm wondering if staff could kindly speak further to the association of these properties with Dr. Ethel Chapman and Phyllis Webb. to significant women from Toronto and Canadian history who both resided at this property during pivotal moments in their life.
Be right with you, Adam.
Through the chair, I'm answering again. On page 8 of the staff report is the statement of cultural heritage value. Within the heritage attributes itself, it also makes the reference to the cornice. We ourselves do not go up on a skyjack and look into the integrity of cornices, so I can't answer that question itself. With respect to the second question, an association of, we acknowledge in the historical background, but those individuals, again, do not meet the criteria for associative value with a prominent person. Thank you.
Jeff. Adam has a few more moments left on his time, and then I'll turn the floor over to you. Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's still the outstanding question pertaining to the decorative leaded windows above the front door and around on the panels surrounding the door. Also, I humbly request clarification as to why Phyllis Webb and Ethel Chapman do not meet this criteria. Dr. Ethel Chapman was a hugely significant woman with women's institutes, especially regarding the migration of rural Canadian women into urban centers in the post-war period. She resided at the building for over 40 years, received multiple honorary doctorates for her work within Canadian feminist organizations and activism. And Phyllis Webb was the first openly lesbian author to publish an explicitly and openly lesbian anthology in Canada while living at this building. This building is situated within Canada's largest and oldest 2S LGBTQ neighborhood. And on top of that, she also founded the CBC show Ideas while, from my understanding, residing here at the property, certainly publishing the first openly lesbian anthology in Canadian history while residing at this property in what was then emerging as Canada's largest 2S LGBTQ neighborhood would meet that criteria, would it not?
In looking at it again, so first with the leaded glass, no, we don't go into that specificity. I don't think it's appropriate for us to get into that detail of leaded glass for a variety of reasons. With respect to tenants of apartment buildings, when a tenant is someone that is famous, we have set the bar for us as associative value that what they're known for or what their work was, as we've done in the past, is that occurred, as we've seen even today with Jarvis, that work is occurring at that. If they're famous for writing books, etc., and they are actually doing that. We've also seen it when it's an artist. Often an artist sometimes paints at home, but may be in a studio. The protocol has always been across Canada in the recognition of individuals in a variety of places, be it their birthplace, their where they grew up, etc. In our case, it's at this point for us. I mean, we could take that back about a long-term tenant. It's just for ourselves at this point, we're not seeing how it reflects within the built form itself as being something to which they influence. But we could do a little bit more of what did they actually do while they were in that tenancy itself.
Thank you very much. Jeff?
Yes, thank you. I want to raise quite a different issue. The numbering, the street numbering, when I look at the map, it shows two properties, 81 and 83. I'm confused whether what happened to 83, basically? You're talking about 81. That's the that's only one of the two properties. And the summary of the report, several paragraphs down, it actually says the city received a zoning bylaw amendment application on June the 6th, 2025, related to proposed redevelopment of the subject property, which also includes the property at 81 Isabella Street. So there's some confusion here.
We could certainly clarify, but if you would refer to page 2 of the report and the recommendation from the senior manager of Heritage Planning, it's 81 Isabella Street with an entrance address of 83. We often get that it's seen as being two addresses, but for us, it's a primary address as being 81, but the recommendation also refers to the entrance address.
Well, the map in the report shows two separate properties. One is 81 and the other is 83.
Right.
So I think the report should say that, you know, when we talk about 81, we're talking about 83 as well. Somewhere.
Okay.
Just otherwise it's confusing.
Okay. Well, we can look at our labeling of a map, but I would just always refer to the right.
It's not your map.
Yes,
It's
of course.
Google map.
That's right. But I would always, it's for informational purposes. I just wanted to make sure to check the recommendation going to council, and it is accurate in that it's 81 with an entrance address of 83.
Okay. And then if you check the paragraph there about the adjacent, about the confusion.
Which
there
page
about
is that on? Sorry,
the
Jeff.
wording. Well, it says the proposed redevelopment of the subject property, which includes the property at 81 Isabella. Like it doesn't make sense.
Okay, very good. We'll clarify that. Thank you.
No, that was it.
Any other questions of staff? So Adam, you're going to go into another little bit of time here. Does that sit well with the rest of my members? Adam, all right. Okay, Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just seeking clarification on staff's former comments regarding the leaded glass not being an appropriate element to discuss. It's my understanding that these decorative panels above the front door, beside the front doors, may be original to the building. I've sent photos out to the fellow board members, and I believe there is a photograph in the report and presentation showing the decorative windows. It's rather atypical not to include those in a designation, given their prominence as you approach the building and their prominence above the main entrances, and that these are twin windows above both the entrance at 81 and 83. I dare say I'll be bringing a motion forward to ask for reconsideration of that in the discussion period, along with Phyllis and Ethel. Thank you.
Are you seeking more clarification, Adam, or was that more
I'm just
discussion?
seeking clarification from staff's comments regarding why they were not included via the decorative leaded window panels.
I guess I shouldn't use the word appropriate, and I endeavor to say that it really helps us to have some of these questions on specific things in advance, so that we could be prepared for it. As you can imagine, the variety of work that we're looking at on these things. I will look at this again with Claire, but I would say that for us, it's not that they're not covered, it's that we don't need to go into such detail of each type of glass that's within that. It is overall the work of the fenestration. I see with this one in particular that there is some decorative element to which we could look at more specifically, but I think I'm just saying the specificity is sometimes not always needed. But we will look at this a closer matter.
Any
Thank
other
you for
questions? Is it a question or are you moving into discussion, Adam?
It's just a question for clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I note that the attributes note fenestration openings, or rather fenestration comprising of arranged rectangular window openings, and the openings I would argue refer to the frame or the shape of the window rather than the decorative content within said window. And hence why I'm seeking clarification and specific inclusion of those decorative elements, because of course you could just rip out the ornamental window and put a plain pane in there, and you lose that level of ornamentation while still maintaining those rectangular openings. And that's my concern with this redevelopment application.
So just to respond, I think it was a comment, but I'm just trying to follow up on the question. We're also looking at the heritage consultant for the property owner and their detailed report. They're indicating that they're not original. We are going to look into the matter as to whether or not they're original. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, and just one big picture thing to say about that. We have, for many years, referenced the openings where we cannot be certain of the originality of the glass. And the reason why we go with something that is not as specific initially is just because, again, we don't want to state things with an absolute where we don't know. And if we start indicating types of glass for one window, then the expectation is we can do it everywhere else. So it is helpful to know these things, and we'll look into it, but that is why we are generally talking about openings and not type of glass.
Other points of other questions for staff while we're in this moment? Seeing none, we're going to move into discussion amongst ourselves. Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I dare say am I muted or unmuted? It's saying I'm muted.
We can
again.
hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I dare say I'd like to bring a motion forward requesting further examination of Phyllis Webb's legacy at this property. While she was residing there, she became Canada's first openly lesbian author to publish material that was openly lesbian in its identity. Prior to this, we had authors that had subversive material or material that was not openly lesbian identified, but to publish this while living there in what was emerging as Canada's new and which soon became Canada's largest and now is Canada's largest and oldest queer neighborhood, I dare say is hugely significant.
All right.
While she was residing there, she was, yeah.
So if you find it significant, why don't you why don't you word a motion? So because we're going to table this item and we're going to have this discussion. I take your point, but let's
Okay.
Let's
I
put
just
our,
want to provide background content, but I'm happy to send it back to clerks for some motion clarification.
Please do.
And we can return to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Tabling point 4. Moving on now to PB 34.5. I'm going to do point 5 first because I don't think we're ready for. We're not. Hi, Kristen. Good morning.
There we go. Through the chair, I'm Kristen Flood, Senior Heritage Planner with Heritage Planning. This report recommends approval of the demolition of designated heritage properties at 2726 and 2734 Danforth Avenue, subject to conditions. Slide, please. The subject properties are located on the north side of Danforth Avenue, east of Main Street and west of Dawes Road, within the historic village of Little York, known today as the East End Danforth neighborhood. The area is associated with an early European settlement at the corner of Danforth Avenue and Dawes, known as the village of Dawes Corner, which later became Little York at the end of the 19th century. and then it became the town of East Toronto between 1903 and 1908. The area was eventually annexed to the City of Toronto. Slide, please. The development site includes 2 Part 4 designated heritage properties. The property at 2726 Danforth Avenue contains the Little York Hotel, which dates to the mid-19th century and is a rare surviving example of a pre-Confederation era building and a unique remnant of the Hotel Inn typology. The design, style, and materiality at the upper story level typifies Georgian architecture, while remnant structural members associated with construction methods that predate the mass production of machined lumber are still present in the basement. The Little York Hotel is in poor to defective condition and is not a candidate for any of the 3 conservation treatments in the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada. The adjacent 2-story Main Street Commercial Row building at 2734 Danforth Avenue dates to 1886 and is representative of the mid to late 19th century local streetscape, with brick-clad wood frame construction and Victorian-era detailed decorative detailing. This building is in poor condition as well, and there is severe structural failure of the front foundation wall, which has been temporarily shored since this photo was taken and poses a life safety risk. Slide, please. The related zoning bylaw amendment application proposes 8-story and 4-story prefabricated modular mass timber buildings that will provide purpose-built rental housing. The application proposes the demolition of the 2 Part 4 designated heritage buildings within the development site, and it proposes a contemporary reconstruction of the Little York Hotel at 2726 Danforth Avenue as a form of commemoration. Demolition is proposed due to extenuating circumstances. Both heritage buildings are in poor to defective condition, and the south wall of 2734 Danforth Avenue is structurally unsound. The contemporary reconstruction of the Little York Hotel, which is a rare historic resource that embodies an early period of area settlement and transportation, has been proposed. Through the application process, all alternatives to demolition were thoroughly explored, and heritage planning staff are satisfied that neither building could be successfully integrated into the development due to their condition. Slide, please. The proposed 4-story building located at the southwest corner of the site and the reconstructed Little York Hotel is at the southeast corner. Oh, thank you. A central courtyard is proposed with the 8-story building located to the rear of the site. Slide, please. This south elevation drawing shows the relationship between the 3 buildings. The 4-story building connects to the reconstructed hotel through a sympathetic link with the 8-story building located to the rear of the site, where it will have minimal impact on Danforth Avenue's low-scale streetscape. Slide, please. This north elevation drawing shows shows the buildings that front onto Danforth and how they will look from the perspective of the interior courtyard. Slide, please. The reconstructed Little York Hotel will maintain a setback from Danforth Avenue. The later ground floor storefront addition, which is not a heritage attribute, will not be reconstructed, and the hotel will convey its original scale, form, and massing without the impact of additional massing, as you can see here in this drawing. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed demolitions are supportable as a last resort within the context of the related planning application. As part of the conditions of approval, staff recommend that City Council secure a contemporary reconstruction plan for the Little York Hotel within a commemoration plan, and that they submit full documentation of each property prior to demolition and implement a publicly accessible interpretive display that conveys the rich history of Danforth Avenue in this area, and in particular the history of the Little York Hotel and its construction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have speakers on this item, and the first is Emily Collins from ERA Architects. We also have Shelley Ludman from ERA. If you're there, are you here? Do you have a presentation, or are you here just to answer questions?
Hi, we're here just to answer questions, but we're joined today by Catherine on the client side, and she has a brief presentation.
Okay, so then I think what I'll do is I will invite Catherine for the presentation, and then we will sort of collectively ask questions. So welcome. As you're getting set up, you'll have 5 minutes, and I will wildly wave my arms to indicate when you're getting close to the end.
Madam Chair, just clarifying, has the presentation begun or have we lost feed to the
Adam, the
PowerPoint?
presentation's begun.
Oh,
Do you-
we're not seeing anything on our end. We're seeing it
Okay.
frozen on the main screen.
Well, there's just the one slide up right now.
Okay.
We're not hearing Catherine's audio either.
Okay. Oh,
Yep.
y-
Yep.
your mic is on now?
Test.
There we
Okay.
go. Here we go.
Thank you. Should I start again? Okay. Okay, thank you. So just a bit about the proposed development at 2720, 2726, and 2734 Danforth. I'll just give a bit of an overview about Collective Marquee. So part of our objectives is to align and deliver on multiple city building objectives with our development proposals. We strive to make our developments attainable financially, to supply at scale. We focus on urban environments such as Danforth, and also have transit-oriented approaches. We also include sustainable aspects to the development, and lastly, like to make sure to ensure that our developments are beautiful and contribute to the public realm. And just a bit of an overview about this particular project and how it fits in with a broader context that we call the missing middle. So Collective Marquee, in partnership with Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation, is advancing a portfolio of 5 of these missing middle projects in the city of Toronto that are all to be completed by the end of 2027. So each of the 5 projects will be located on major streets or avenues. They will be directly served by rapid transit, by local amenities, and retail. They will be designed in a missing middle built form, which is an 8-story, simple rectilinear form with minimal sculpting. And they're constructed using innovative and environmentally sustainable wood modular panelization techniques, as Kristen mentioned. They will be purpose-built rental apartment buildings, each of which will provide 10% affordable housing. And they're also planned to have 0 parking, and they are a slab-on-grade construction with no basement. And a bit about the construction logistics: because they're mass timber, the components of the building can be fabricated off-site. and the panels can be transported to site. So it's a much faster and quieter and cleaner form of construction for the surrounding neighborhood, and we don't require lane closures as well. So some of the objectives more broadly in this proposal is the Main Street Heritage Building. So it is a reconstruction of the distinct heritage building currently located at 2726 Danforth Avenue. We include the sustainable development piece with mass timber construction and a broad range of sustainable design choices to address a range of city resilience objectives. And finally, we provide new rental housing with a total 10% of the units being affordable. Running out of time. So I'll briefly go over the proposed development a little more. So the subject site, as we saw, is at Danforth. It's just east of Main Street and the Main Street subway station. It's approximately 1,267 square meters, and it backs onto the rear lane. So again, we have a new 4-story and 8-story mass timber buildings and the rebuilt 2-story heritage building. 64 rental units in total. 55% are proposed as 2-bedroom units, and we, inside the rebuilt heritage building, will have 2-story live-work units, and again, 0 parking, just bike parking, and the interior courtyard, which is shown here in the ground floor. That's a rendering of the courtyard from the interior, and some isometric views of the scale of the proposal, the 8-story, 4-story, 2-story. Okay. I think I can just wrap up with that. So thank you. In summary, the proposal intensifies an underutilized site with 64 new rental units on the Danforth, which is served by transit and local amenity. And I'll wrap up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we're now going to open the floor to questions of our consultants. So we have both Emily and Shelley online, and then we have Catherine. So if you are asking a question, if it's specific to ERA or to Catherine, just make sure we get that straight. So Jeff, you're up.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I have a question about your statement about the end. It's a rebuilt heritage building. Am I misunderstanding this? It seems to me the original existing building is on the west side, whereas this is now going to be on the east side, right?
Yes.
Okay, so my understanding is correct.
Correct.
But secondly, what do you mean by rebuilt heritage building? It's not actually a heritage building. It's a new building, right?
It will be a new
But
building.
it would be, is it a replica of the existing in effect?
I would
Is that
like,
what we're doing,
if
or-
I could actually turn this question over to ERA to answer. as
Yeah,
their
perhaps
expertise.
I can answer that. So it is going to be a contemporary reconstruction with new materials to speak to the scale, the existing scale, form, and massing that we see on site today. But the materials that exist on site were not found to be in good enough condition to be salvaged and reused. So it is a fully new building. It will just reference the existing form and scale in a contemporary version.
Any other questions, Jeff? Okay. Other questions for our consultants? Alex?
Yes, will it be, in fact, the same footprint size, only moved to the east, or will it just be similar in footprint and height, et cetera, et cetera?
It will be the exact same footprint with regards to the original rectangle. There are some winged additions that do exist on site that will not be reinstated, but the original kind of simple rectangular footprint will be the same and moved to the eastern portion of the site.
Thank you. And I think I read somewhere that the original building was plaster or something, maybe rough cast, and has since been covered with clapboard. I couldn't quite tell from a rendering whether it almost seemed to have a clapboard-like finish, but what's your plan for the external wall?
I can speak to that, Emily. I will also just jump back to your earlier question for a moment to just say that the setback from Danforth will also be maintained. As you would have seen in those the current photos, there's sort of that one-story addition that has been built as a more contemporary addition. And so the original Little York Hotel was set back from Danforth, and that setback will be retained, which also creates kind of a wider sidewalk public area in front of the building. Regarding the proposed cladding, so currently we are showing a clapboard to kind of match a vertical, sorry, not vertical, a wood siding, sort of a more contemporary material, but those details will get refined as we kind of advance further with the design into the next stage of the project.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if you are the appropriate people to ask the question about commemoration, but that was certainly emphasized in the staff report. Are you planning to save any of the old timbers in the basement, which sound very interesting? And if so, could they be incorporated somehow into the commemoration?
That will be part of our kind of next phase of work as we look into the commemoration plan and an interpretation strategy for the site. There's a kind of beautiful dialogue between the contemporary use of mass timber overall for the new construction and the historic use of timber in the Little York Hotel. So there's a story there that is worth telling, however the commemoration and interpretation plan advance.
Thank you. I think that would be very worthwhile. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Other questions for the consultants? Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm interested in the two door openings in the new form of the building. Is it intended that those be working door openings, and if so, is there public access to something inside, or do they work at all, and what's behind them, and who enters there?
Yeah. I can speak to that, and Catherine, feel free to jump in if necessary. So currently historically there would have been five openings on the ground floor. The intention is to convert 2 of those openings, as you noted, to doorways, 2 window openings to doorways, and those would access 2 of the 3 live work units that are intended to be within that new building. So there will be 3 units, 2 of which are accessed through those new doorways, and 1 will be accessed through a doorway in that kind of slender transition zone to the west.
Terrific, thank you.
Other questions for our consultants? Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Building on Paul's question there, I note that the reconstruction seems remarkably similar to the Charles Gates Hotel, the 1870 illustration in a previous report. I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity for further engagement of the design at first. I guess the first question is this reconstruction based on historical evidence of the Little York Hotel, or is it based on the illustration of the nearby Charles Gates Hotel from the same era? And the second question pertains to streetscape at grade elements. It's a rather bland looking building with those 2 entrances and most other inns on roads in and out of Toronto from the Confederation era had some sort of engagement at grade, whether it be a covered veranda as a stagecoach stop or whether it be a storefront element. And I know the current building has had a storefront for over 100 years. It's just distinctive with the bay windows. But certainly I think most other inns or buildings of this use from that period had a covered veranda originally. And that's based on illustrations in a number of historical sources pertaining to these inns in the Toronto area. Has any consideration been given to altering the store or the at grade design to have some more curb appeal, I dare say, in terms of either veranda or storefront element? And the second question is, will any lost elements such as chimneys be reconstructed as part of this plan?
Okay, I will begin, Adam, and I think I caught 3 questions, so I'll run through responses for those. The first being what is informing the contemporary design work. So as part of our HIA, we had done a type study on inns historically and have pulled some of the key kind of elements of that as a design. And so currently that is what's informing it in terms of scale, form, mass, punched openings, and that's kind of where things are at right now. Regarding the sort of pedestrian kind of front animation piece, I think there's design work that has to happen as part of the commemoration strategy, and part of that will likely be tied to what happens kind of in front of that building, whether that's, you know, something related to paving, perhaps an awning or covering that will evolve and sort of be reviewed as part of as the design evolves. What was the third? The third question was with the chimneys, right? No, currently there's no proposal to reinstate the chimneys. As mentioned previously, this is really a contemporary reconstruction, and so we are picking up on some of the, you know, the key kind of big elements of the type of building, and not details such as the chimney.
Other questions, Adam, in your time?
No, I'm happy to go to the discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of our consultants? Seeing none, thank you very much to all of you for being here and for your presentation. We are going to move into questions of staff. Just letting them get settled, Adam, and then.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, Adam, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can staff speak about how there may be differences in a contemporary reconstruction of a heritage building versus a retention and restoration of a heritage building, and which differences this may allow in terms of approach as to design elements or interpretation plans?
Through the chair. In terms of the contemporary reconstruction, it was informed by the heritage attributes that were in the designation bylaw that lend themselves to a reconstruction strategy. So like Emily and Shelley said, the scale, form, and massing, the fenestration pattern, the material type, so with that horizontal clapboard cladding, those are really the emphasis. But in any reconstruction where you're looking at contemporary uses, there are lots of elements that will need to be brought up to current standards to make those uses viable. Thank you.
Other questions, Adam?
Not at the moment, no, thank you.
Okay. Are there other questions of staff? Paul?
Thank you. I guess, how's this for punishing people for doing a good job? I really like the fact that on a site where the original structure had no continued viability, there's been an effort to preserve the essence of what was there, the spirit of what was there. But my question is, I know there is a desire not to create imitations or false replications of heritage buildings. And I'm just wondering, can you offer any thoughts? Does this meet the general policy of not creating facsimiles? And in your mind, how would you differentiate this project from others where that isn't an appropriate strategy? If that question makes any sense.
Yeah, through the chair. That was really the challenge of this project, especially where the original ground floor is missing, and we don't have a lot of historic documentation that shows what that ground floor would have looked like. So the approach that was taken here, like Shelley said, was coming to an understanding of the typology and what was commonly the design of buildings like this, as well as an understanding of that nearby inn that Adam mentioned, where we do have historic documentation. And then beyond that, the goal is to take a somewhat more minimal approach where we weren't sure. Like for example, with the idea of a veranda, we decided not to go that route because that would be a little bit too much of a leap. So we are going with the more minimal interpretation of the typology. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Is it a question for staff, Adam?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, let's try.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you clarify what you mean by a little bit too much of a leap? It's my understanding the consultants mentioned a typology study on inns, and I dare say most of the inns had some sort of covered element, especially along stagecoach routes due to our frequently inclement weather here in the Toronto area.
Through the chair. Well, like Shelley said, there may be the opportunity to explore like an awning or some form of covering as the uses and the detailed design are refined. But the exact refinement of those details would have to be carefully considered to avoid conjecture or creating a false impression of the historical appearance of the building.
Other questions? Seeing none, moving into discussion amongst ourselves. Does anybody have a point of discussion? Adam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I dare say I would like to have a motion to nudge some further refinement of the design elements, drawing on inspiration from other area inns. I feel that the current design is somewhat bland, and even bland for a pre-Federation inn on the Danforth Avenue. And certainly the illustration from the nearby Charles Gates Hotel that's drawing inspiration to this design element for the reconstruction of this building means that they are drawing inspiration from other inn designs. And perhaps there's an opportunity to draw decorative elements from other inn designs while not providing a false narrative. So I've been working with clerks on the motion over the past 45 minutes or so in advance
Have
of
you
this item.
submitted that one, Adam, I think?
The clerks have been going back and forth over the past 45 minutes with staff, and
Fair enough. Well, we have a few motions
Yes.
behind the scenes that we're working with today.
Yep.
Just give me 3 seconds.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take this moment as a procedural just because I would love to we've tabled a few, and I would love to get them done before we do the confidential, just because if we go in camera, it's an extra hoop to go through. So Adam, can you check your emails, please? And if you have...
I've responded back, and I think we have 2 ready to go, and the 3rd is almost ready to go.
Okay, so we're all going to take about 30 seconds right now to see if this item's one is ready to go, and then we'll move backwards just for the sake of some consistency.
Clerks, I did send a response back at 11:13 a.m. With the most recent.
We're on it,
wording
Adam.
request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Adam, I appreciate you listing the time. Can you go back through and maybe send another one for the 2 that were tabled for point 3 and point 4? And just make sure that everything is to your satisfaction?
On the Isabella Street one, I had sent back alternate wording at 11:23 a.m. or a request for alternate wording. I'm not sure if staff saw that because they responded at 11:24 a.m. And then the Jarvis Street one is good to go.
So Adam, you need to confirm in writing, okay? Appreciate the timestamp. Maybe just as a safety precaution, just sort of send a quick confirm again, please and thank you. So while we're waiting, the old City Hall is opening up its courtyard today. So that would be a lovely excursion after TPB to go and take in some of the city's heritage that is now going to be able to have more eyes upon it. And you don't have to see this mug for like 6 more weeks until September. There's a really robust website for Old City Hall and sort of the different programming. So it's open on every Friday for the next 8 weeks to sort of go and have a look around. And then there's other food trucks and seating. And it's going to be delightful, especially on a Friday where it's not muggy as it had been for the previous part of the week. So I think any chance to take in our history in a different way and during the summer.
Clerks and staff, please check your emails.
They're on it, Adam.
Thank you.
They are just working their hearts out here. So we're going to give them
And
a
I
whole
do
lot
want
of
to acknowledge
latitude.
Tamara's request that things be sent earlier, and we are trying to do that through the panel. We are all volunteers, and we often sometimes get these materials quite close to when they're coming to preservation board, I think, as we all understand. So we are trying to send them as soon as
agenda materials
possible.
for preservation board, we all get them in advance. We all get them, we have a week to read them, and Adam, like you, the rest of this board, although appointed, are volunteers. We are all in the same boat. We all have other jobs and are working together. We are all volunteering for the good of this city. So we understand, but we hear you. And like we're all doing that too. And we all try and give clerks and staff some heads up within our power and our reach, you know, and to our abilities, so that we can have as productive a meeting as possible. So while we might want materials, you know, 3 months in advance, I think we do have ample time. Okay, I've had a lot of water. We're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we're going to get all of these approvals in order, because I think a little bit needs more. So rather than so go get yourself some water, go have a little bio break. We'll meet back here at 11:42.
Clerks, I think we're good for all three motion wordings.
We're waiting on Isabella, Adam.
Yep, not to worry.
We're good to go. Welcome back. Yes. So we're still on PB 34.5, and we're going to continue this item, go back to the two that were tabled prior, and then move on to our final item of the day. So moving forward, I think clerks are going to put the proposed amendment from Adam on the screen, and I'll read it out. That the Toronto Preservation Board recommends that City Council, pardon me, Jeff? Yeah, that recommends. It's a recommendation. The wording has been tweaked and confirmed. So that recommends that City Council request the Senior Manager, Heritage Planning, Urban Design, City Planning to continue to work with the applicant's heritage consultant on the development of a commemoration plan that explores the opportunity to reintroduce lost elements such as early chimneys, verandas, and storefronts within the contemporary reconstruction of the Little York Hotel. So, Adam, you have you've already sort of spoken to the motion in terms of how you were going to introduce it. Do you have any other brief remarks?
This is just based on what had been mentioned. Thank you, Madam Chair. What had been mentioned by the consultants and staff in terms of they drew the reconstruction based on other area inns from this period. And earlier today, I sent an email out to the board members with some illustrations of other inns that do have these elements. Seeing as this is not a restoration, but rather a contemporary reconstruction, I had hoped that we would have an opportunity for further engagement within design elements at the site through either investigation into the current build form or through looking at other area example inns. What we have right now is very, very plain, and I worry may not be typical of other inn examples. So, and I thank clerks and staff for their assistance with the wording of this motion.
Thanks. Jeff?
Can you put the motion back on the screen again? To me, it didn't seem to do what Adam wants to have done. Sorry? No. Well, okay, but it refers to the interpretation plan. It doesn't refer to the design of the hotel reconstruction building.
Sorry, just to clarify, Jeff, because this is a contemporary reconstruction, the commemoration plan, that is one element of the commemoration plan. So we're used to understanding a commemoration plan as being a display or information, but in fact, the contemporary reconstruction of the Little York Hotel is a part of the commemoration plan. So that's why it's referencing the commemoration plan.
So it does cover.
It does,
Okay,
absolutely,
fine.
in this
I
case.
just wanted to-
It wouldn't always, but it does in this case, yeah.
Okay.
So moving in, so we've had a question sort of the amendment, of the proposed amendment. Are there other questions or discussion points? Paul?
Well, I just when I looked at this item when we first came to it, the big item before us was we have a designated building that is not in good shape, and is there any option to keep it? And the answer is clearly no. So that's fine. We move on to a commemoration plan. I get that. I guess my question is that really in our purview, and are we kind of getting off topic by getting into the commemoration plan? Or would it, and the big thing is, would it happen anyways? Do staff continue to work on these anyways? So does the motion really serve any purpose, or are we just kind of, writing on the blackboard reinforce what will happen anyways? I'm just a little leery of creating work for ourselves or for staff if it's going to happen anyways.
Other sort of questions of the proposed amendment, or? Seeing none, any other points of discussion before we vote on it? So we have a proposed amendment. Yes, Adam?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a little bit of lag on the computer system. I dare say the reconstruction rather than restoration does allow for a little bit more flexibility in the interpretation of what elements maybe or may not be included. Is that correct?
Sorry, reconstruction as opposed to?
Restoration.
Yeah, those are two different processes.
Yep. And what we're looking at, the reconstruction allows for greater flexibility. Is that correct?
To my understanding, there's flexibility, but it has to be very carefully considered. As we heard from staff before, you can't create false history.
Of course.
And nor do you want to replicate something just for the sake of, and this is going into sort of opinion, is I think there is a very fine balance when doing a commemoration in terms of creating something that is an homage to the past, as opposed to, a replication that seems incongruous with its current environment. Like, there's a very unique opportunity here, and it is, I think, a very fine line that needs to be walked. Other discussion? So we have a proposed amendment. It's moved by Adam. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hands. And then, okay, and all those opposed? The motion carries. We now have before us a staff report as amended. Any discussion upon before we proceed to a vote? Seeing, yes, Adam?
Oh, thank you. I just want to say I do want to commend staff and the applicant for still pursuing some sort of reconstruction of this building on site, with the details, of course, still being worked out, but rather than just saying it's too far gone, we're demolishing and starting from a blank slate. So I do want to thank them for still pursuing the reconstruction.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a staff report as amended before us. Who would like to move those recommendations? Anybody? Vote on the item as amended. Thank you. Getting the wording right. So Jeff moves that, voting on the item as amended. All those in favor, please. And the motion carries. That's everybody. So moving on back now to PB 34.3. And we'll bring up we've got an amendment proposed. This is the Jarvis Street. So that the Toronto Preservation Board requests that Senior Manager, Heritage Planning, Urban Design, City Planning to consider the inclusion of leaded and stained glass at 506, 510, and 512 Jarvis Street in the list of the property's heritage attributes. Adam, do you have anything further to say that you haven't already said about leaded glass and your feelings about them?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a hugely significant block on Jarvis Street. It's the only surviving block with all of the mansions intact on it. And within these 3 properties and the broader 5 properties on this block, we see the full range of leaded and stained glass, ranging from the very highly colored pre-electrification glass to the clearer glass that reflects electrification in Toronto. And I want to thank Henry Knight for identifying the significance of these leaded and glass and stained glass windows on this specific block. And I'd like to thank my fellow board members, staff, and the consultants for bearing with me as we work through these motions.
Are there any points of discussion or questions about this amendment, the proposed amendment? We can put it back up, yep, if you don't mind. Any questions or? Yeah, please, Mitchell.
Just wanted to clarify if adding this puts the intention to designate at risk. Like, will it affect the timeline as it goes to council?
I'm going to push this over to Mary.
Sorry, I was dealing with another motion. Through the chair, our apologies. The same staff who are answering the questions are writing the reports and writing the motions, so we're getting a little boggled.
A good question through the chair. No, it won't impact that. Yes.
Other points of discussion? I think I'd probably just raise like my own bit of point is I love the city's stained glass and leaded glass. I think it's very important. But we talked earlier about trying the burden on ownership as well for some of these places and the environmental sustainability of leaded glass and how it wears going forward and all of that. I think all of these things can be protected. But I'm wondering, it's that balancing act in terms of protecting heritage attributes that ought to be protected, but also ensuring that a building can still continue to breathe and have life going forward in a way that's possible. But that's just me thinking out loud here more than anything else and putting that on the table. Yeah, Tamara.
So just to say for the details of the stained glass, et cetera, it's within the context of the architectural style itself and whether it embodies it. It's not a general umbrella that if it's leaded glass, it is. There is going to be discerning. And I would just say that if we don't complete and have the ability to see these properties or get access to them, the report would proceed as is, and there's always an opportunity at a future date. So that's what I was just saying. We do have the time if we have access, but otherwise it won't negatively impact it still proceeding in September to planning and housing. Thank you very much.
Actually, that's really helpful clarification. And the amendment does say to consider. So other discussion points? So we have the amendment before us, moved by Adam. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. The amend carries. And now we have a staff report as amended before us with recommendations. Would anybody like to move the recommendations in that report? Mitchell, thank you very much. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on now to PB 34.481, Isabella. That the Toronto Preservation Board, 1, requests the Senior Manager, Heritage Planning, Urban Design, City Planning to consider the inclusion of the decorative leaded windows in the list of the property's heritage attributes, and 2, request the Senior Manager, Heritage Planning, Urban Design, City Planning to further examine Phyllis Webb and Dr. Ethel Chapman in the history of 81 Isabella Street. So we'll leave this on, yeah, just as we're sort of considering. So, Adam, you spoke very passionately about the associative value with those two women, and I think that was, heard very loud and clear. Is there any other sort of comment that hasn't already been made that you'd like to add?
Yeah, if I may, Madam Chair, I spoke significantly about Phyllis Webb, but just briefly, Dr. Ethel Chapman, hugely significant within rural to urban migration of women in Canada after the war period, hugely significant with the empowerment of rural women, hugely significant within women's institutes in Ontario. So a very, very important person within the empowerment of rural women and the empowerment of urban women as well.
Thank you. Are there any sort of questions or points of discussion related to the proposed amendment? Seeing none, we have amendment proposed before us by Adam. We'll move to vote. All those in favor, please. And the motion carries. Thank you. And then just taking a brief pause as clerks continue to... Are you ready to go? Okay. And so now we have, unless there's any sort of discussion... Okay, making sure I'm not quashing voices, don't want to do that. We have a report as amended before us. Would anybody care to move that? Karash, thank you. And all those in favor? And that carries, thank you very much. And now speeding to the last item on our agenda, 1117 Queen Street West. There is a confidential attachment to this one, so we'll have a public presentation. We'll have then the opportunity to move in camera, should we be required. All of the confidential materials that you received can only be discussed if we go in camera. And I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but I'll say that sort of every time, that we have to be very, very careful there. So I will turn over the floor to Erin.
Good afternoon. Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon. Through the chair, I'm Erin Smith, a senior heritage planner with Heritage Planning, and I'm here today presenting item PB 34.6. This is a request for directions report regarding 1117 Queen Street West, alterations to a designated heritage property and demolition of heritage attributes under section 33 and 34.11 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Recently, the TPB and Council considered requests for directions from the City Solicitor on revised heritage permit applications that were submitted in February 2025. The applicant has now submitted subsequent newly revised plans in advance of a scheduled OLT hearing later this year, and so the City Solicitor must request directions from City Council. Next slide, please. So this may look familiar to you, but the site is situated on the south side of Queen Street West. It's individually designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and it is also within the boundary area of the recently council-adopted West Queen West Heritage Conservation District area. However, this HCD is currently under appeal, and it is not in force and effect for the application at this time. Next slide, please. These are photographs of the Heritage Building. This is the front of the building seen along Queen Street West, shown in the left-hand picture. And on the right side is the property fronting onto Lisgar Park. The building is known as Postal Station C and is a two-story Beaux-Arts building designed by the architecture branch of the Federal Department of Public Works. Next slide, please. Here are photographs of the east and west side elevations, which front onto Lisgar Street and Abel Street, respectively. Next slide, please. As a reminder, this slide shows renderings of the original redevelopment scheme, which is under appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Next slide. Thanks. Because the revised plans were filed formally with the Ontario Land Tribunal, they are publicly shareable, and I will highlight some of the revisions as they relate to the heritage permit applications. So this slide here shows the revised site plan for the application, which continues to propose integrating the 4 elevations of the Postal Station C into the base of a new mixed-use development, adaptively reusing the Postal Station C with alterations and an addition above. Next slide, please. This slide shows the renderings of the revised massing looking north and south down Queen Street West. The detailed design of the addition at this stage is conceptual, and that will come at a later stage in the process. Next slide, please. These are renderings closer up, looking at the south and side elevations. As described in the public report, a number of the elements of the conservation strategy remain consistent with the original application. In terms of the addition, it has been revised from a 28-story to 27-story addition, and the massing directly above the heritage building has changed, though it does retain the curved design of the addition. In the revised application, the step back of the addition above has been revised to 4 meters at its smallest point when measured from the face of the heritage building. In the revised plans, the glazed reveal that's shown above the heritage building has been increased to 5.65 meters, as seen from Queen Street West. And lastly, the addition's cantilevers on either side of the heritage building have been revised to project by 1.2 meters, a revision from the original application projecting 2 meters. That's a summary of the revised plans as they relate specifically to the heritage permit applications and concludes the public portion of the presentation. The remainder would be in camera to present the board with the recommendations of the city solicitor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just waiting to see everybody. I'm assuming because it was held that we want to move in camera. Okay. Yep, clerks are just going to put up the motion for us to do that. That the Toronto Preservation Board meet in closed session to receive advice that is subject to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality of the local board for item PB 34.6. All those in favor of moving in camera? And the motion carries. Thank you very much. So clerks are just going to close things up for us. So hold tight. So we have a report before us with recommendations. Any last little points of discussion? Seeing none, would anybody like to move the recommendations of the report? I will. Oh, or Mitchell. All those in favor, please. And the motion carries. Thank you very much. We are going to adjourn until our next meeting in September. So just as a couple of takeaways, we do get the meeting materials a week in advance. Clerks, I think, would really benefit if you are considering an amendment or a motion a little bit more than the meeting time, even if it's just sort of the morning of, so that we don't have the pause and the back and forth as they're trying to check their emails, especially for those who are, you know, it's hard being hybrid. It's just hard in what we're being asked to juggle. So I'd love to extend a whole lot of courtesy and right now a whole lot of gratitude to clerks and staff for doing what they do. And then to planning's point, things and questions are going to come up through the course of our meeting. No problems there, and in discussion points, et cetera. But if you do have some questions that you have thought up before, even just to sort of flag it so that we can have robust answers, that's to our benefit. It's to the public's benefit, because ultimately that's what we're here for, is to ensure that good heritage conservation and to be the sober second thought to a whole lot of things. So I think the more evidence and the more information that we have and that we can empower others to have, then we're just doing a better job all around. We are all in the same boat here. And so with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday and the rest of your summer, and I'll see you in September. Meeting's adjourned.